and asking myself, do you all know who I am? Of course I'm nobody, but I'm thinking, do you know who I am? I am actually a rock star already because in my heart I was for decades. However, behind the flowing scarves and mystical allure lies a love story that has remained hidden until now. A secret romance that shaped her music, fueled her greatest songs, and left an imprint on her soul. Who was the man who held her heart captive for so long? What untold emotions lie beneath the melodies we know by heart tonight? We discover the passion, heartbreak, and enduring love that characterized her journey from brief affairs to devastating breakups. These relationships weren't just headlines. They were the lifeblood of her artistry. Each chapter of her love life became the soundtrack for a generation. This is the untold love story of Stevie Nicks, a woman who loved deeply, lost painfully, and turned every broken piece into music that would last forever. She was a dreamer with a voice like no other, and he was a quiet, brooding guitarist with a talent that couldn't be ignored. When Stevie Nicks and Lindsey Buckingham. It wasn't a dramatic whirlwind when they first met in high school. It was just a simple moment between two teenagers who loved music. Something unspoken but undeniable sparked between them, and their voices blended in a way that felt almost predestined, as if the universe had already written their future in harmony. After high school, they drifted apart, but fate had other plans, and 2 years later, Lindsey, who was now playing with a psychedelic rock band called Fritz, needed a singer. Without hesitation, she accepted, and that one phone call changed everything. Fritz became their training ground, where they learned about the harsh realities of the music industry. They opened for rock legends like Jefferson Airplane and Janis Joplin, sharing stages with artists who were shaping the counterculture movement. Despite the excitement of performing for large crowds, Fritz never succeeded because the industry was ruthless and fierce. Soon after the band broke up in 1972, Stevie and Lindsey's dream began to fall apart. They packed their lives into a beat-up car and drove to Los Angeles with nothing but their love and a shared belief that they were meant for something bigger. Since the city was unforgiving and the dream was harder to achieve than they had thought, they struggled to pay their rent. Stevie worked as a waitress and a cleaning lady, cleaning the homes of the very people she had dreamed of being. Lindsey, who was always the perfectionist, was focused on their music and determined to prove that they were worth more than just another failed band. After months of hardship, they finally got their chance to perform live in 1973. Album that demonstrated their chemistry in its purest form. His complex guitar work, her ethereal voice, their harmonies blending like magic. But it failed, received no radio play, hit singles, or sudden rise to fame, just another rejection. However, rejection didn't break them. It only made them more determined. Then, in 1974, their luck changed when Mick Fleetwood, who was looking for a new guitarist for Fleetwood Mac, called Lindsey and was impressed. He offered him the position, but Lindsey had one requirement: Stevie came too. It was a risky move, but one that would change the course of music history. Stevie's voice and presence, along with Lindsey's raw talent, took the band to places they had only dreamed of. Then came rumors about the album that defined not only their careers but also their relationship, their heartbreak, and the pain of a love unraveling in front of millions of people. By the time they were recording Rumors, their love had already started to fall apart. This was a new world where success and chaos would collide. Their addition to Fleetwood Mac was an instant transformation. The band had previously struggled to stay relevant, but now had a fresh, intoxicating sound. In the midst of all the chaos, they produced music that would endure. Stevie poured her heartbreak into Dreams, a song that was both a farewell and a longing for what once was. Lindsey responded with Go Your Own Way, a bitter, fiery anthem that sliced through the air like a blade. They weren't just writing songs, they were having the final say in a relationship that was collapsing in real time, and the entire world watched as they sang their suffering to one another, lyric after lyric after lyric. Stevie and Lindsey spent decades performing together, the history woven into every note, every glance across the stage, every harmony that still carried the ghost of what once was through breakups, reunions, and solo ventures. They were never able to escape the echoes of a love story written in chords and melodies. It was never just about the songs. It was about them, their love, and their chemistry. Even after the romance ended, the fire between them never truly faded. Los Angeles in the 1970s was a world of smoky bars, endless jam sessions, and a music scene where legends were being made overnight. It was in this electrifying atmosphere that Stevie Nicks met J.D. Souther. He wasn't just another musician. He was already an established songwriter deeply embedded in the West Coast rock movement, and his name was etched in the foundations of the Eagles, co-writing some of their biggest hits. In the end, it wasn't about heartbreak, passion, and war. Souther was different from the men Stevie had previously dated because he was not caught in the same cycle of chaos that Fleetwood Mac thrived on. He was steady, self-assured, and a man who understood the industry without letting it consume him. He saw her not just as a rock star but as an artist in her own right. His sound was smooth, sophisticated, effortlessly cool, and for a brief moment, he and Stevie found themselves drawn into a whirlwind romance. Their connection was instantaneous. They spoke the same language, the language of melodies and lyrics of long nights spent dissecting songs and dreams. With Mick, it had been forbidden and transient, but with JD, there was no war to fight, no lingering wounds to navigate, and in a way that made it even more dangerous. Souther was a songwriter first, someone who could craft a story in 3 minutes and leave listeners yearning for more. His influence on Stevie was undeniable. He taught her how to refine her writing, how to strip a song down to its core and let the emotion do the work. But beneath the sweetness of their romance, there was an undercurrent of something unspoken. Stevie had spent years demonstrating that she was more than just someone's girlfriend or singer in a well-known band. She was creating something of her own that couldn't afford to be overshadowed by another man's success. And even though JD respected her talent, she couldn't ignore the way the industry still viewed women. She saw how male songwriters, producers, and musicians were given a level of credibility that women had to fight for. She had worked too hard, made too many sacrifices to avoid becoming someone's supporting act. Deep down, she knew that if she stayed and let herself into the comfort of his world, she might lose the passion that had brought her this far. Their passionate romance was never meant to last because their love of music was the same thing that tore them apart. Stevie was about to start her solo career, stepping out from Fleetwood Mac's shadow to prove that she could stand on her own. In order for that to happen, she couldn't be defined by another relationship. Instead, she had to be Stevie Nicks, not Stevie Nicks J.D. Souther's girlfriend. As a result, she left in quiet understanding, choosing her independence, her music, and even though their time together was brief. Though she never discussed J.D. in interviews, the respect she had for him was clear in the way she talked about songwriting, about the lessons she had learned along the way. Their story wasn't one of tragedy or betrayal. Rather, it was a moment, a fleeting chapter in the long, complex novel of Stevie Nicks' life, a relationship that existed not to break her. In the years that followed, echoes of their relationship found their way into her songs. After the Glitter Fades carried the wistful but ultimately unsustainable love. But to remind her of who she was and who she was supposed to be, and ultimately that was enough. It was the kind of mistake that could break a band, the kind of love that was never meant to be. Stevie Nicks and Mick Fleetwood were more than just bandmates. They were family, bound together by their shared love of music, fame, and the chaotic maelstrom that was Fleetwood Mac. However, in the late 1970s, in the midst of the storm, they crossed a line that wasn't even anticipated. Mick was married. Stevie had recently left Lindsay, and their relationship had always been based on mutual respect, trust, and a deep creative bond. But somewhere in between the innumerable tours, the late-night recording sessions, and the emotional rubble left by their previous lovers, something changed. What began as a friendship between Ed and Ed evolved into something else, a stolen moment, a secret they weren't ready to admit even to themselves. The affair was quick and bright, but it never lasted. Mick was Fleetwood's leader, Mac was the band's glue, Stevie was the band's biggest star, and Stevie's voice had captivated millions of people. They had everything except the ability to make it wake. Their romance was concealed from the public, but Lindsay knew that tension existed within the band. Christine knew, John knew, and no matter how hard they tried to keep it from affecting the music, it did. The unspoken glances, the shift in energy, the quiet resentment, it all seeped into the atmosphere of Fleetwood Mac, already a band teetering on the edge of dysfunction, and then just as quickly as it had started, it was over. Mick, struggling with his own demons, ended things. His marriage had already collapsed under the weight of it all, and his affair with Stevie only added to the wreckage for Stevie. It was another heartbreak, another lesson in love and loss, but unlike Lindsay, Mick wasn't the kind of man she could fight for. He was brilliant, complex, self-destructive, and she knew deep down that he would never be hers. The band had already survived Stevie and Lindsay's breakup, so the answer was somehow yes. If Fleetwood Mac had proven anything, It was that they could endure anything. The pain, betrayal, and mistakes all became part of their story, woven into the music that defined them. Stevie channeled the heartbreak into her songs, allowing the pain to bleed into the melodies. Sarah, one of her most eerie, deeply personal songs, was a love letter to what could have been a whisper of a life that slipped through her fingers. The lyrics carried a quiet sadness, a longing for something that was never real enough to hold on to, and Mick, he buried himself in the music, and the madness of being the man who kept the machine running. His relationship with Stevie became another piece of history, another chapter in the tangled web of love and heartbreak that was Fleetwood Mac. Looking back, Stevie has called the affair a mistake, one that hurt people, one that she regrets, but she's never denied the truth of it. The connection between them was real, even if it was fleeting, and like everything in her life, she turned it into art, into something that would last. Because in Fleetwood Mac's world, nothing was ever simple. Love, music, pain, and passion were always entangled and inseparable. For Stevie Nicks, this was both the greatest gift and the greatest curse. From the moment they met, their chemistry was evident. She was the rock and roll queen and the captivating voice behind Fleetwood Mac, and he was the Eagles' mastermind and songwriter. They weren't just rock stars, they were icons, and when two forces like that collide, the impact is indelible. They were not just two musicians falling in love, they were survivors navigating the highs and lows of a world that demanded everything from them. For a while, it was easy. The music, the laughter, the feeling of being with someone who understood the life they both lived. But love in their world was never just about love. There were schedules, tours, egos, and expectations. Then, the news that Stevie was pregnant hit like a tidal wave, crashing into a relationship that had. Stevie had spent her life fighting for her independence, her music, and the freedom to live on her terms. Motherhood was something she had always dreamed of, but not in this way. Not with a man who wasn't ready. Not when the world was pulling her in a million different directions. As a result, she made the hardest decision of her life, ending the pregnancy, which would haunt her for years and leave her with a wound that would never heal. They were both at the height of their careers. Don Henley never forgot either. He later disclosed that if the baby had been born, they would have given her the name Sarah. The weight of that name followed Stevie into her music and into the heartbreaking lyrics of a song that became one of her most intimate confessions. After that, things were never the same. The romance that had burned so brightly began to fade. Not with an explosion, but with a quiet unraveling of the pressures of fame and the unspoken grief between them. Stevie has stated that Don Henley was one of her greatest loves. He understood her in a way that few others did, and their relationship left a mark on her perspective on love, loss, and the sacrifices that come with being a woman in rock and roll. Love was never simple for Stevie. It was passion, pain, beauty, and regret, all woven into the songs that would outlive them both. Even though she left Don Henley and the life they might have had behind, she carried the memory with her in every note, lyric, and whispered line from a song that still haunts people today. When Stevie Nicks entered the studio to record Belladonna, she wasn't just creating an album. She was creating history. Jimmy Iovine, who wasn't just another producer but a visionary and force of nature in the music industry, stood next to her, helping to shape the sound that would define her solo career. Before either of them realized it, their collaboration became much more than just music. Jimmy saw something in Stevie that few others did, and he understood her as a solo artist with a voice unlike anyone else. Knew how to push her, how to make sure the world saw her the way he did. And during the long recording sessions and late nights spent striving for perfection, something changed between them. The lines between producer and artist blurred, and suddenly they weren't just creating an album, they were delving deeper. Their relationship was intense and passionate, based on respect for one another and a shared love of music, but it was also complex because Stevie wasn't used to being produced. Instead, she was used to battling for creative control and was used to creating music on her own terms. Jimmy, on the other hand, was as much as they loved each other, Belladonna became their love story. Every song, note, and lyric was infused with the energy of their relationship. But as the album took off, so did the cracks in what they had built. Jimmy was demanding that Stevie become the biggest solo artist in the world, but Stevie wasn't just his artist. She was also his girlfriend, and the boundaries between their personal and professional lives began to blur in ways that neither of them could control. The breakup was inevitable. It wasn't explosive or dramatic. Rather, it was a slow unraveling of something that had been doomed from the beginning. Jimmy was devastated that he had lost not just a girlfriend but an artist he believed in, a woman he had poured his heart and soul into. And Stevie left with an album that would. Even though their love didn't last, Jimmy would go on to become one of the most powerful figures in the industry, shaping the careers of countless artists. Stevie would continue her reign as the queen of rock and roll, her solo career cemented in history. Although their love story was short, its impact was undeniable, because sometimes the most powerful relationships aren't the ones that last forever. They are the ones that. Stevie Nicks had always believed in fate and that some things in life were meant to be. But in 1983, grief clouded her judgment and she made a decision that shocked even herself. She married Kim Anderson, the widower of her best friend Robin. It wasn't about romance or love. Rather, it was about loss and holding on to anything that could preserve Robin's memory. Stevie was more than just a friend. She was Stevie's soul sister, the one person who had supported her through every hardship when Robin was diagnosed with leukemia. In the midst of her grief, Stevie convinced herself that marrying Kim was the right thing to do. She told herself that she was stepping in to take care of Matthew the way Robin would have wanted. But deep down she knew it wasn't love, it was desperation. It was a way to escape the loneliness and quiet the voice in her head that told her she had lost something she could never replace. When Robin died just days after giving birth to her son Matthew, the pain was unbearable. Stevie wasn't just mourning her friend. She was mourning the years of laughter and memories that would never come. The marriage lasted only a few years. Months before reality set in, Stevie realized that she wasn't meant to be a wife in this way, to raise a child in a house built on grief, and the weight of it all was crushing and suffocating. She looked at Kim and Matthew and realized that this wasn't right. Robin was gone, and no amount of effort could bring her back. The divorce was inevitable. It wasn't filled with anger or betrayal, just the realization that they had both made a mistake. Stevie left, heartbroken, not only for herself but also for Kim, Matthew, and Robin's memory. She had tried to do the right thing, but ultimately, love couldn't be forced, and the fallout was brutal, and Stevie lost herself in drugs. Looking back, Stevie calls it the biggest mistake of her life, but she learned a lesson from it that would last a lifetime. Grief cannot be rushed, healing cannot be forced, and love cannot be built on loss. She carried Robin's memory with her, not in marriage, but in every song she wrote. It was exhaustion in the never-ending grief that she had tried so hard to outrun, the pain of losing Robin, the guilt of making a choice she didn't understand, and everything weighed on her like an anchor. Stevie Nicks had experienced love in many forms, passionate, destructive, fleeting, but with Joe Walsh, it was something different. It wasn't just romance, it wasn't just chemistry, it was something deeper, something unspoken. He was the one she called her great love, her soulmate, the man who understood her in ways no one else had ever met. That's what Robin would have wanted. Not a marriage built on sorrow, but a life filled with music, love, and the kind of magic that never truly faded. In the early 1980s, two legendary figures in rock and roll, Joe Walsh was already a guitar god and a key member of the Eagles. He was a man whose talent was only surpassed by his wild spirit. Stevie was at the pinnacle of her solo career, juggling the chaos of fame with the chaos of her personal life. In the midst of all of this, they found each other. Their love wasn't flashy or dramatic like her previous relationship. Instead, they laughed together, understood each other's suffering without having to explain it. The rock and roll lifestyle that had given them everything was also destroying them. Nights blurred into mornings, highs were followed by crashes, and somewhere along the way they began losing pieces of themselves. When they were together, it wasn't about the industry, the expectations, the constant pressure to be legends. It was just them. And for the first time, Stevie felt like she had found something that could last. Love, even the deepest kind, isn't always enough. Stevie wanted to save Joe, but neither of them could, and that was the hardest truth of all. She could see the path they were taking, and she knew how it would end. One of them would lose the other, not out of love but because of the darkness that threatened to consume them both. With a heart heavier than it had ever been, Stevie made the decision to leave. It wasn't because she stopped loving him, but rather because she loved him too much. She knew that if they stayed together, they would destroy each other, and Joe knew it too. Their breakup wasn't motivated by anger or guilt. Simple, the kind that never completely goes away. But the regret never left her. She carried the pain of losing Joe Walsh with her, turning it into songs that whispered, "Has anyone ever written anything for you?" A song that was more than just a ballad. It was her love letter to Joe Walsh. Looking back, She has referred to him as the love of her life, the one who could have been forever, the one she never stopped thinking about. But life had other plans, and sometimes even the greatest love is insufficient to combat fate. In the end, Stevie Nicks had many loves. Some burned brightly and ended in flames, while others left scars that never went away. However, with Joe Walsh, it was different. He was the one she walked away from, the one she never stopped missing, and the one she would have done anything to keep if only the. Perhaps the sadness is that the world had been kinder to them both. Sometimes love isn't meant to be, even when two individuals are intended to be together. And the only things that remain are the music, the memories, and the echoes of what could have been.